Hi there, I know there are already a bunch of deep desert guides for the solo player out there, so why should you watch this one? Because in this guide I will show you how you can do up to 80% of the content in the deep desert, including the PvP zone, with next to no equipment, and how you can, some weeks, not all, you need a bit of luck, make up to 7 million solaris in less than 30 minutes. And I will talk about some advice that you may come across in other solo deep desert guides that is absolutely terrible, so that you can avoid those pitfalls. So the activities you can currently do in the deep desert are capture control points, shipwrecks, farm spice, mine ore, caves, treasure hunting, and Techlabs. I will link an online map tool in the video description that updates every week, and you can use it to easily find the location of everything in the deep desert. So let's start by talking about equipment. First of all, forget all advice you may have come across about grinding any type of tier 6 gear or tier 6 ornithopter parts before you enter the PvP zone of the deep desert. Just making tier 6 wings and engine for your scout is a total of 260 plastonium ingots and 160 spice melange, since you also need to build the advanced vehicle fabricator. Imagine grinding for all that before entering the PvP zone and then lose the ornithopter your first run. That could make anyone rage quit and then write something angry on Reddit. So what do you actually need then? Well, as the title of the video suggests, almost nothing. Tarl Cutteray, Softstep boots, any level, compact compactor MK5. The compactor is not a must, but it's nice to have. And then you need a tier 4 ornithopter scout. Tier 5 engine and wings if you are feeling rich, but it is very much optional. Let me explain why. Risk versus gain. If you have a well-established tier 5 base, you should be able to mass produce tier 4 ornithopter parts. You can farm a new one in 15 minutes or less. With a tier 6 ornithopter, you have a slightly higher chance of getting away, but just slightly. Some guides advise players to follow the edge in and out of the deep desert to avoid detection, but that is just a huge waste of time. PvP players are simply not hanging out in the air hoping for someone to fly by. They get you when you're down on the ground compacting, and faster ornithopters won't help you with that. You will just lose something so much more expensive. Let's move on to Tarl Cutteray. You can find the Tarl Cutteray in two different locations in Sheol. The big wreck here in the middle and the small wreck down here in the corner. The big wreck in the middle has no enemies, but it is very dark inside, so bring a glow tube. This wreck is a very good practice run, since some weeks you get this one in the deep desert, so make sure to learn how to run this one fast. More on that later. The one in the corner is very small, but it has a few enemies. If you have no luck with any of the wrecks, just log out to the main menu and switch siege, and you can loot the wrecks directly again. Just remember to pack your ornithopter before you go, because you will end up at Griffin's Reach every time you log back in. You can loot the permit for the compact compactor MK5 in the Techlabs in sector A2 and A3 of the deep desert. Those labs are PvE, so they will always have the loot, and they are not hard to run with tier 5 gear. A lot of times you won't even have to fight at all, because they are frequently farmed, so sometimes there won't be any enemies left and you can just run through it all and grab the big chest. You can get permits for level 1 Softstep boots in the testing station 197 located here. There are only 2 permits here, so chances are very good to get them, but just like in the case of Tarl Cutteray, if it's not here, pack your ornithopter and log out and switch siege and try again. Before I start talking about activities you can do in the deep desert, I need to briefly mention the Landsraad, since the goal of some of those activities is to earn points for it. To participate in the Landsraad you need a guild, but it can be one person, and you need to align that guild with a faction. Every week you get a bunch of tasks that all require you to deliver some type of items or materials, or to kill a number of NPCs to get points towards high tier rewards. New tasks for each house will unlock with a timer throughout the week. You can find out the tasks early by bribing house representatives with 300 spice, so not really worth it as a solo player. You hand in the items and materials to the quartermasters belonging to each faction. The Atreides quartermaster is here, and the Harkonnen quartermaster is over here. And when you have enough points for a house, you can claim the rewards by talking to that house representative. And in the description of this video, you can find a link to a site that has the location of them all. But there is another way to earn points for the Landsraad that is not bringing items or materials, and that brings us to the first activity you can do without equipment in the deep desert: control points. You can earn points towards Landsraad rewards by capturing and holding control points. Most of the time you only get 10 points per minute from holding the point, but you don't have to be there for that. You will just keep getting points until the house is fully claimed, unless someone from the opposite faction comes along and captures it. Capture is very fast, and I have never ever seen anyone guard the control points. The tricky part is to find one you can actually capture. You cannot capture them before the task is revealed on the Landsraad, and you cannot capture them if they are already held by your own faction, or if the house is fully claimed. They also stop providing points after the house is fully captured. So for example, this control point can no longer be captured, but this one can. So look for the unclaimed houses where the control point is not held by your faction on the Landsraad board. If you manage to snatch one, you can often get all the points you need for a full reward from the house in question. You can find the location of all control points using the online map tool linked in the description. Let's move on to small wrecks. For this you need a Cutteray and your ornithopter. It's the same type of small wrecks you have in Haga Basin out in the sand, but in the PvP zone of the deep desert you can get tier 6 permits from them. The wreck has 3 lids you can cut open, one on the top and one on either side. It is the small lid on one of the sides that can give you the tier 6 permits, but all of them give ship manifests that can be very useful for the Landsraad. So start with a small one and do the rest if you have time. You usually do. From the small wrecks to the big ones. Remember that wreck in Sheol? The wrecks in the deep desert are not as scary as you may think. Different weeks have different types, so you don't get this type every week, but when you do, then this wreck is the jackpot for anyone who wants to go skinny dipping in the deep desert. Just like in Sheol, it has no enemies. You can run through the wreck and loot it in less than 60 seconds, and you get tier 6 permits and more importantly a lot of plastanium dust. I have gotten as much as 20 from one single wreck, but on average it feels closer to between 13 and 16 per wreck, and you can easily do 3 or 4 of them, including flying back to Arakim in less than 30 minutes total. And plastanium dust sells for a lot of money. Prices may vary per server and throughout the week, but on my server at the time of recording this video, you can sell them for more than 200,000 each. And if you put them up there for 150,000 each or something like that, they would probably sell faster than ice cream a hot summer's day. Obviously, sometimes the wrecks will already be looted, but in my experience, they will have loot a lot more often than you would think. The exception is when there is a very valuable permit to loot. Then it will be empty most of the time, and there will also be a high risk of running into other players. But then you can stay away from that particular wreck and do the rest of them. By the way, this video is full of timestamps, and here's another one so that you can skip ahead when I ask you to like and subscribe. Well, I kind of already did, so that was pointless, but that said, if you're only interested in a particular part of this guide, use the timestamps to jump there right away. Or don't, because it will hurt my retention metrics, but who cares about that? Anyway, let's continue. So the big wrecks with enemies are a bit scarier than the ones without, but you can do them just fine with tier 5 uniques. The hardest one is the one called the walkway, because it has a room where you get locked in and have to kill all the enemies before you get out. And while doing that, you run the risk of other players ambushing you. But if you die here, all you lose is a little bit of durability on your gear. I plan to do a guide for all the wrecks in the deep desert and how to run them fast, including a build that is good for mixed PvE and PvP. And once it is finished, it will be linked in the description below this video, so if you are watching this in the future, it might already be there. There are shipwrecks in the Aero as well, and just like in Haga Basin, they are PvP zones, but most of the time they have loot and you won't see other players there because most players are busy doing stuff way deeper into the desert. You have to fight a few NPCs for most of the wrecks, but it's a very fast way to get tier 5 uniques if you don't have them already, and to farm spice-infused duralinium dust that you sometimes need from Landsraad points. Let's move on to the topic of farming spice by talking about what type of base you should build in the deep desert. If you just started playing in the deep desert as a solo player, then start with a small base. Just large enough to park your ornithopter. Nothing fancy, a box with a pentashield on top will do just fine. A few generators, storage and repair station, and material for repair of compactor, Cutteray and suspensor belt. Place it close to where the PvP section of the deep desert is starting. You can make a bigger base for processing ore and spice, but as a solo player that is really only worth it if you dedicate the week to doing just that. It is not worth it setting up a big base if you do mixed activities unless you have a lot of time on your hands. Once you got your little base set up, it's time to fly out into the PvP zone looking for spice. As a solo player you will be mostly focusing on the medium fields, but nothing is stopping you from grabbing spice from the big ones either. Go naked with Softstep boots and your compactor, and the only thing you will ever risk losing is stuff you can farm up again in no time at all. Some guides recommend that you pocket your ornithopter and make a little pile of the spice on the ground until you have enough to load and fly off. The idea is that you won't lose it if you get attacked. But it takes much longer to do it that way, and you still have to take out the ornithopter every time you get worm aggro and when loading up in the end. I think a better way is to keep the scout out, compact 10 to 12 times, load the spice, lift up a bit to lose worm aggro. You don't need to go that far up. Take a sip of water if need be, go down again, another 10 to 12 compacts and repeat. That way you will never get a worm break, and that will save a lot of time as well as reduce the risk of being detected by other players. Also, it can be quite profitable to have some. Most of the time it will work out in your favor. If you see a spice field but someone is already there compacting, don't skip it. Fly in, say hi and land at respectful distance and start compacting yourself. If they are there to compact, most of the time they are not looking for a fight. They just want to go home safe with the spice. You can do this, even if we are talking about a big field where there might be a harvester. Unless it is a big guild with plenty of ornithopters guarding, just fly down on the opposite end and start compacting. Most likely they just want to get home safe with that harvester full of spice and not draw attention to themselves. Let's move on to mining. Just like with spice, the question of processing the ore in place or flying it home for processing comes down to the scale of operation. If you do mixed activities, then just farm the arrow with an assault ornithopter and then have somewhere to process close to the map board in Haga Basin. If you plan to focus a week on mining, then it might be worth it to have a base close to the PvP zone and process in place, because in the PvP zone you can find clusters of ore that are very quick to mine. If you want to play safe mining in the PvP zone, then use the scout there, and obviously for this activity all you need is the Cutteray and no clothes. Some weeks there will actually be high tier reward chests in some of the caves in the deep desert. The best way to know if there are any and where they are located is to check an online map tool like the one linked in the video description. Treasure hunting works the same in deep desert as it does back in Haga Basin. What you do is you fly very close to the sand and you scan and look for little yellow squares. It's a lot easier to see them at night. They are usually in clusters, so if you find one, then you can usually find others nearby. When you see that little yellow square, fly up close, scan again so you see the exact location, jump out and compact. They reward a bunch of tier 6 materials and open fire games used for the Landsraad. Since this is quick in and out, all you need for this is the compactor. I have already mentioned the Techlabs in Aero that award tier 5 items, but there are Techlabs further out in the PvE zone that award tier 6 items. These Techlabs can be hard to do solo, but there's a lot of players who want to do them, so if you just ask in global chat for help, there are usually other players who want to do them as well. We just wait for someone else to ask and join up. And then of course, with a bunch of players, they are not hard at all. There are also Techlabs in the PvP section, and these are the only current content that you cannot really do as a solo player. Well, you can do it, but it's extremely hard, and considering that you might spend 40 minutes there and the chest is already looted, it's not really worth your time. The last thing you can do in the deep desert, well, you can technically do it in Haga Basin as well, is to become worm food. I have actually not been killed by Shai Halud prior to recording this video, so stick around if you want to see that happen. Ooh, a worm tooth.